Hello. Yeggooner. And this is going to be the review of chapter 1 of Arsene Who. My wife likes to call the book Arsene Who? Arsene Wenger. And one thing I would say is that because this was a birthday present, shout out to Osas for buying this for me. And I requested this book because I knew that I was gonna start doing YouTube, but I wanted to know my club inside and out, and I'm gonna do a lot more reading on my club. I'm gonna do a lot more background information, just because it's important. Arsenal's been important to me in my life, and there's one thing for you to watch every single game and analyze the game, but there's another thing for you to know what it means to be a part of London Colney, what it means when you sing the song 1-0 to the Arsenal. That right? That's something. What the FA Cup means to us, that's another thing. You get me? These are things that are engraved in our DNA, right? And being an Arsenal fan has been one of the greatest joys in my life, but also it's giving me lots of sorrow. Lucky I have a wife and kids, and I have my God. You get me? But the first chapter was called Arsene Who, and reading it, right, I believe the reason why they did the Arsene Who is because of the headlines that were coming out at the time. We back in those days, right? 1995, 1996. Those back as it may not seem like it's that far away, right? It may not seem like it's because it's still 1990s, right? They didn't have Twitter, they didn't have or X as we like to call it now. They didn't have Instagram. They didn't even have text messaging on every single phone, right? So Arsene Wenger is a real what's the word? Student of the game. So he wasn't a very good player, right? He wasn't a very good player. I think he retired at the age of 30. But he retired at the age of 30 to focus on coaching, because he was studying these coaching credentials when he was still playing. He played as a centre back, right? Man's a tall guy in it, you get me? So obviously he's gonna play as a centre back. Played as a centre back, and he learned his game from there. He also went to AC Milan to study under their coach for a couple of weeks, right? He's just a beautiful man. And so how this all came to be, because this is what the chapter is about. The chapter is about how Arsene Wenger got tied to Arsenal, how our board and our directors at the time believed that Arsene Wenger was destined for Arsenal. And so it's I believe it was Barbara Dean. Barbara Dean was the person that saw Arsene Wenger inside Highbury Stadium in the booth, and guess who we were playing? Guess which fried chicken we were frying? Was seasoning and peppering them 2-0 to the Arsenal. George Graham was beating Tottenham Hotspur, or as I like to say, Tottenham Fried Chicken, 2-0. And Arsene Wenger was coming from Istanbul to watch the game. He had 2 weeks off. He was coming from Turkey to watch this game because he was in London for I think 2 days or 3 days. And so he met Barbara Dean, who is the wife of a director of Arsenal at the time, a chairman at the time, one of the highest stakeholders. I believe at the time David Dean owned about 49% ish. But yeah, I don't have to top of my head. But she noticed him there, and they got to talking, and she was like, "Man, this guy, he's very charismatic. He's very smart." And so then they've gone to a restaurant afterwards, because she's asked, "Yo, do you want to go out? You want to go out and eat? You get me? Because this guy's a sophisticated man." He's like, "Yeah, obviously. I'll bring my wife. You bring your man, them, and then we come up, and they're playing charades. They're talking. They're eating." And at that point in time, my man Arsene Wenger, he's the Riz master. He charmed them. You get me? And what's really amazing about this was 1989. This is when this happened, right? And so 1989 is when this happened, and at the time we're playing George Graham football, 1-0 to the Arsenal. That's where it comes from, because George Graham was more militant with our squad. He was more defensively rigid, right? It wasn't fluid, right? And so Bruce, I think I said David earlier. So Bruce Wrench was the next manager to take over George Graham. The reason George Graham had to come out is because of a scandal at the time, and so he had to he had to depart. And so at the time, we had signed Dennis Bergkamp under Bruce, and Bruce was only there for a year and a half. And at that time, he took us to a I think it was a final of the Cup Winners' Cup. We didn't win it at the time, and we were playing a Spanish side. We lost, and we were playing free in the back, right? So we were playing more or less Ajax football back then, after George Graham. And Arsene Wenger was supposed to get the job after George Graham, but no one knew who he was. They weren't confident in him, and he's foreign as well. He's French, so they didn't want to give him the job because he was French. At the time, there was only, I believe, was it one manager that wasn't French at the time inside the league, and that was Ruud Gullit, player manager for Chelsea, back in the days where Chelsea were a mid-table side. And there wasn't even that much foreign players in the league that time, right? So you're gonna bring in a Frenchman that, like, Arsene could barely speak English, right? So he took a 3-month course on English, right? Back in the days when he was playing and he was studying, and obviously, it's a good thing he took that 3-month course, because if he didn't, he wouldn't even know English, right? This man didn't know the English, and he was managing Monaco. No, you couldn't watch those games. You get me? Only some journalists could watch the games because they're journalists, right? They have to be knowledgeable about these things so they know who these managers are. So they travel, watch the games, and so the inner circles, right? And like managers, journalists, they knew Arsene Wenger was a man. Them, he knew they was good, but no one else did. And so this Bruce Roach got the job. One thing he did do for us is that he bought Dennis Bergkamp. At the time, they bought Dennis Bergkamp for 7.5 million. Today, in today's currency, that'd be about 17 million, I believe. I'm not too sure. And maybe the conversion I did was incorrect, because that doesn't sound right. 7.5 million in football doesn't sound right. But Dennis Bergkamp was introduced to the club at that time. And at that time was the year before Wenger took over, which is 1994, that season. The reason that Bruce didn't work is because of the fact that he fell out with the players. And that really, and like when I'm reading this book, even though I'm Arteta out, I see the parallels and why our board wanted Arteta. Because Arteta parallels Wenger so much. And I think that's why our fan base are so attached to Arteta, right? Because he parallels him so much. Even the way he comes in. So we had Emery after Wenger, long-standing manager. George Graham was a long-standing manager, and then we had Bruce Roach afterwards. And so with that, you've seen a parallel where two managers fell out with players. The reason Bruce got fired is not because of his performances, it's because he fell out with players and the way he used to speak to the board. He fell out with Ian Wright literally from the get-go. And Ian Wright, he was one of the driving forces to push him out, right? Big man like Ian Wright was one of the driving forces to push him out. And so Arsene Wenger, after not getting the job from because he got singled out from Bruce, he went to go manage in Japan. So he's still he managed Monaco. He actually had a really good record with Monaco. He won a couple of league titles, and Marseille at the time had a scandal. So he comes second in some of the times where Marseille went first when during that scandal. So he's managing Gump 8. The board leader for that guy in Japan was the owner of Toyota, and he's managing them at the time. And when Bruce gets fired, all right, David Dean was just like, nah, this ain't happening. I'm getting my man this time. Arsene Wenger's destined for Arsenal. So we picked up Arsene Wenger from there. And one of the first signings Arsene Wenger got was a young 20-year-old Patrick Vieira. So that's chapter 1. Arsene Who? Arsene Wenger.